You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Baracchini, and Alex Hobson.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 169 of Sticks in the Six. And Peter, I know we were just live a few days ago, and people are getting sick of these mean mugs that we got going here. But we have a special guest coming on today to preview some of the Leafs season, looking ahead to 2024-25. We also have we're going to be discussing a little bit of the off season that the Leafs have gone through, the changes that have happened with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, if you're watching, you can see it in the title up top there. It is former Maple Leaf forward and enforcer Jay Rosehill. He'll be joining us for the second time in the Sticks in the Six history. So we're excited to get Jay on here and get his opinions. Obviously, a host of the Leafs Morning Take over at the Leafs Nation. But before we get into all of that, Peter, I know it was only a few days ago, but how you doing so far this week, my friend?
I was about to say, not a whole lot has changed since, 2-3 days since we last did a recording. But you know what? I mean, it's good that we're getting the content out, even though it's the summer times, dog days, not a whole lot's going on. But at the same time, it's never a dull moment with the Leafs. There's always something to talk about. And you know what? It's great that we're getting someone that's like in doing the same thing as us, podcasting, but also like as a former player himself. He knows what to do, or he knows how to look at the team analytically from his standpoint in Jay Rosehill. So it's good to have him on to talk about his take, what the team has done so far in this offseason. He'll be joining us momentarily, but yeah, I can't wait to see can't wait to hear how this conversation is going to go, because the last time we had him on, it was a great time, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same time around this time.
Yeah, a little bit different from last time. Last time we had him on, we were talking a little bit more about his career and what it was like being an enforcer in the league, and what's happened post-career. Obviously, I believe he's a firefighter still out west. Am I correct?
I believe so.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. So I believe he's a firefighter.
We can verify that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun conversation to have him on. I will say that in the last few days, I've grown this obsession with. I don't know if you've heard of this app that everyone's obsessed with right now, Temu.
Temu.
Have you heard of Temu?
I have never heard of Temu.
Okay,
unless it's like a player's name. I've heard Temu before, but
do not download it. It is it's
okay.
I'm obsessed. I'm buying all this shit to kind of organize my hockey cards. And anyways, don't even look at it. Don't forget I even mentioned it. But if anybody's listening and they use Temu, yeah, I know what the problem is. Anyways,
is this the next big thing app kind of thing right now? Because
it's like
there's always one every single summer that's just taking over.
Okay, it's like this cheap shit, basically, like stuff you don't need, but you can find them for like $5 on Temu, and it's sent to you within like a couple weeks. So, like I'm talking handheld saws, man, like stupid shit that you just do not need, but. Anyways, that's my obsession over the last few days. I got a couple orders coming, so I'm trying to organize my hockey cards a little bit.
Okay. All right.
And I will say, speaking of hockey cards, I just pulled a Dennis Hildeby Young Guns the other day.
Hey, there we go.
So I'm looking at adding. So I got the Nyes, I've got the Hildeby. I'd like to get Bobby McMahon, and I would like to get Fraser Minton from the last series from Upper Deck here.
Completing the Maple Leafs rookie class.
You know what the problem is, though? People know that it's the Maple Leafs and they overcharge, right? Like
that is, or maybe it's because of the whole Connor Bedard thing too.
Yeah. So, anyways, with that said, obviously we are brought to you by the Hockey Podcast Network, proud members of the Hockey Podcast Network family. Brought to you by DraftKings as well as BetterHelp. And before we get our guest here, when your schedule is packed with kids' activities, anybody like myself, a father, knows big work projects and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Now, I've mentioned this in the past. I'm not somebody who's personally used BetterHelp. That said, I have used other strains of therapy to get through roadblocks in my life, and it makes a huge difference. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. And this podcast and the Hockey Podcast Network are proudly sponsored by BetterHelp. Well, Peter, until we get Jay here, I know he's running a little bit behind. He's got some interviews. He's a popular dude, man. Like
Very popular.
When he talks, he's charismatic. You like those people on the podcast. So we will be joined shortly by Jay. But just in the last couple of days here, we saw big news in women's hockey with the star Slovak joining. Was it Wisconsin? I believe it was Wisconsin Badgers in the NCAA. And obviously, you know, this is big news with the PWHL going the route that it's going, taking the steps it's taking in women's hockey to now have a star from not only a different country, but a young star commit to the NCAA. How important is that for women's hockey?
Absolutely important and big shout out to, you know, from my other side of the family, Slovakia right there. I'm super excited to see Nela Pushanova come over and, you know, take hockey by storm. I mean, this is absolutely huge, and you want to see the game grown. And you saw the clips of her at like international tournaments as a 16-year-old, like just dominating the competition where, you know, they're older than her and she's just putting up points nonstop. This is absolutely big. This is fantastic. And hopefully at some point, maybe in the near future, we'll get to see her in the PWHL. I can't imagine, with how big this league has grown, with how big the stars are coming over right now. Maybe when she's done college, that's going to be the next step, because that will probably be one of the next faces of the next generation of women's hockey coming up. So yeah, very big, very, very exciting in terms of getting more notoriety and getting all these younger talents up. It's exciting. Again, we saw how big the PWHL was this season, and it's only going to continue to grow when you get stars like Nela back into the game and into a major league like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we are very happy now to be joined by Jay Rosehill, former Maple Leaf, obviously a co-host of the Leafs Morning Take. Great show over at the Leafs Network. How you doing today, Jay?
Hey, boys, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome back. We're glad to have you on.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
So we'll kick it off with obviously the Leafs off season. Back in January, you called the Berube hiring. What are we seeing? Is this a transition now to get a guy like Berube, a coach like Berube into the Leafs organization, make it a little bit more of that tough mentality that Dubas kind of steered away from during his tenure with the Leafs?
Yeah, in so many ways, I think. You watch them come up short in the playoffs so often, and then you look up at the teams that have success, and there's obviously some deficiencies that the Toronto Maple Leafs have in the way they play. There's a few ways you can go about fixing that. You can mix up the players and juggle some of the personnel that are on the ice. And if you can't do that, if there's contracts and no trade clauses and all that type of stuff, you know, the other obvious and easy play is to change the coach. And that's nothing against Sheldon Keefe. I think he's a good coach. I think he could easily have success in New Jersey. But, you know, being in a locker room a lot, when you have the same guy saying the same things, I mean, a coach can only look at things, you know, from his perspective, and it's going to be the same message kind of over and over again. And if you need to make a big change with the same players, I think the easiest and best way to do it is to make a coaching change and to have Craig Berube come in there, implement some of his philosophies and try to give that team a new identity, I think is a good direction to go, because the players are good enough. They're just not putting it together at the right times. And I think that a new mentality coming from a coach could help them quite a bit.
It's funny that you mentioned having the great talent that they have, but not putting it together, because at the draft, Berube made himself available in Vegas. And during the scrum, I asked a question about like, what kind of identity does he want this team to have? And we kind of heard it from the outsets of his opening press conference where, not giving up on hits or like shying away from the physical play. You want to be intense. You want to win those puck battles. And from the quote that he said was, he wants to set an identity right away, how we want to play night in, night out. More than anything, that's the one thing that he wants to expect out of his team right there. And we also saw that during the 2019 playoffs when he took over for the St. Louis Blues, how he didn't have the star-studded team, but the players put in that work ethic. Is that still possible given how much skill this team has from top to bottom of the roster?
Well, I really think it's up to the players to decide how they're going to react. And if they're going to, are they going to accept the fact that they need to make changes? Are they going to accept the fact that the way they're approaching the playoffs in particular is not how to get it done? If they accept that and are open to change and open to changing their approach, then I think they could absolutely have success. But everyone's different, and a team's made up of individuals, and what every organization is trying to do is get those individuals to collectively come together with one common theme and goal and approach to that. So if they're open-minded enough to say, hey, listen, here's Craig Berube, he's going to do things different. He has a certain mentality, he has a certain experience, and he's going to try to steer us in this direction. If they're open and willing to get on board with that and to look around in that room and say, hey, boys, let's all dive into this together, I think that they could absolutely have the success that they're looking for. But if those guys are all stuck in their own ways and worried about themselves and their own stats and individuality and their own careers, and I do things my way, it's not. It doesn't matter who you have at the helm. It doesn't matter what jersey you're wearing, what city you're playing in. It's just not going to work. And for whatever reason, it hasn't worked for them so far. So I'd like to think they're all professional and open-minded enough to realize that a change is in order, and for them to open their ears, listen to Craig Berube, and say, hey, let's all jump on this train together and see what we can do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Max Domi just recently came out too, following signing that extension, said pretty much the same thing. Like, I'm not focused on the individual aspect of signing the extension or being here as a Leaf and following my dad's footsteps. I'm here to win, and I think everyone in that dressing room wants to win. And I mean, it's one thing to say all the right things, but obviously, as you said, we need to kind of see it put in place as well. Now, the Leafs recently came in as one of the bottom teams in terms of confidence in the front office, and I want to get your take on this. Like, is this an issue? Obviously they made the coaching change this offseason, but is this more of an issue that is above that? Maybe not so much Brad Treliving, as he's kind of newer there, but more like a Brendan Shanahan issue?
I think time will tell. I mean, if you put yourself in their shoes and you pull the strings and make everything happen to get a team put together, and make no mistake, there's high quality players on the roster that they even managed to acquire and develop and draft and sign and get them in the locker room. So if it doesn't work a year or two, you can understand how they're like, I'm not going to bail on this right away. It's a cap era, no trade clauses, all those things I mentioned. It's difficult just to be like, we're going to go in a different direction and totally change things. You're kind of, once you plot a course, you kind of got to stick to it. But I think they're certainly at a turning point where it's like you've had enough time with these players to get something done, either shit or get off the pot. Are you going to go and make it happen with this group or not? And like I mentioned, it's not easy to change the group of players in the locker room with the snap of the fingers, but you can change the coach in that way. So they've elected to go with the coach, but I think it's a very important year for the group to say, with this new coach, are you able, the players in that locker room, are you able to come together and do something in the NHL, in the playoffs when it matters or not? And, contracts are expiring and things are going to happen next summer. So it is a big year. Obviously, Shanahan has planted his feet and his heels in the ground and said, this is what we are and this is where we're going. So, he's going to have to live or die by that. And I think this year is going to be a big indication on whether it'll be anything to call home about or not.
And the coaching change was the main one, but obviously fans, critics, everyone in the media said that this past season was a time for change to shake up the roster, be it, a Mitch Marner trade or anything like that, but they're running it back with the core. Given how they brought in a new voice, is this basically we thought this past season would be the last time this core would be together, but is this one coming up the final one of the core, given how the contracts are coming out or leaving in terms of Marner? Tavares is up for a new contract. Is this the last time where this is probably the last dance with this team for sure?
Well, I think so. If you look at just the contract situation, I mean, John Tavares, whether he re-signs with the Maple Leafs or not, it's certainly not going to be for $11 million. I think the captaincy will be handed over to Austin Matthews at the end of this season, and he will be the leader of that group going forward. That's not to say that John Tavares won't want to stick around in a different role. He lives there. It's his home. I think he has a passion for the Maple Leafs. I think he wants to win there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's back, but it won't be in that core four, obviously, setup that it's been for so long. With Mitch Marner, I firmly believe if something was able to change, or if a team wanted to make a play that made sense to them and Mitch was willing to waive his no trade clause, I think that if all those ducks were in a row, I think that the Maple Leafs would have gone in that direction and really shaken things up. It's just so much easier said than done. You got to have, a team that's willing to take on him and his remaining contract. You got to have them give up something that makes sense for the Leafs to justify losing a Mitch Marner caliber of player. It obviously hasn't happened yet. Will it happen throughout the season or the trade deadline? We'll see. But the team is what it is right now, and they have to find a way to make that work and to figure out how they need to play the game to win in the NHL in this day and age. And what happens after this season when the contracts expire, we'll see. But I mean, I don't think it does anyone, any favors to look ahead to past this season and next year and what might be. It's kind of irrelevant. These guys have got a new coach. They need to listen to his message, figure out who they are, and try to get on the same page where they can have more success than they have.
Being a former player, Jay, like when a new coach comes in, what's the message that, as a teammate, you try to get across to the guys in the room? Like, it's definitely a new voice. It's going to be a new system. What's the mentality going into that?
Well, if I was John Tavares, I would have my own team meeting with these players and say, hey, look, it's no secret that everyone's watching us. We have the biggest market in the world, cheering for us, cheering against us, frustrated, hopeful, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of eyes on this group, and they know they haven't had it, they haven't got it done. They haven't had success in the playoffs. They've had flops and come up short. So I would want that team and that group, after training camp, when who's going to be in that jersey, I just sit everyone down and say, hey, listen, whether you love Craig Berube or not, whether he's good to you or not, whether he's your favorite coach in the world, everyone's going to have different opinions on the coach. There's 24 guys that are all having a different experience. But if everyone can just listen, pay attention, try to absorb what he's speaking and try to understand what his vision is for the group. And if everyone can kind of link arms collectively and say, let's get on this guy's page and see what we can do, I think that's the only way that you can really go down the road of success, is if everyone's on the same page. But for me, that locker room needs to wholeheartedly give themselves to Craig Berube and say, what is your plan for this group and what can we do to help accomplish that? And I think that teams that have success all have guys in the locker room doing exactly that.
No, absolutely. And I agree, because you see what was done during the playoffs this postseason with the Edmonton Oilers. They had a coaching change and they managed to finally get it together and find their footing. Despite the defensive flaws and goaltending, they managed to pick themselves up. They had a weakness and it kind of became a strength until the very end. The Florida Panthers, they were the best team in the league as a result of having that balance and that work ethic and mindset from basically the start of the playoffs to the very end. And it's interesting to see how that's going to play out, because like you said, Tavares has got to step it up as a captain and he's got to get everybody on the same page. I think that's going to be very important. Speaking of the main roster, obviously there were a lot of changes that happened this season. Bertuzzi's out. A lot of roster overturn. Chris Tanev was brought in, acquired for his rights, then signed Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Anthony Stolarz. It seemed like they added a lot on the back end and tried to work around some pieces around up front. Given what they've done to this point in the offseason, what would you grade it as of now, and what needs to still be done? And if you're Brad Treliving on and you have a to-do list to do?
Yeah, I think if you just isolate it to the back end, I mean, if you go back 2 or 3 years at the Maple Leafs defense core and then look at it now, obviously it hasn't been put on ice and you haven't seen exactly how they're gelling, but on paper, I think it looks pretty solid. You got, a few different layers of different styles of players with different experience levels and skill levels. And I think that, if things go anything but, really poorly and you get a bunch of bad luck and guys aren't gelling and you can't find that chemistry, which I don't expect any reason for that to happen. I think that decor could look pretty solid and kind of just be out of sight, out of mind for the team. Where I see it, being a little bit lackluster as you look at the forwards and you're seeing, Holmberg and McMahon being up there on high up in the depth chart. And I just nothing against those players, but if you're talking about a Stanley Cup caliber winning team, I think you need a lot more depth and a lot more pieces up front. Obviously you've got your firepower, quote unquote, with what used to be called the core four or whatever. And those guys are quite talented, but when your problem is scoring goals and putting the puck in the net in the playoffs, I worry a little bit about their forward setup. You can't put everything on Austin Matthews and say, oh, go win us a series, go win us a Stanley Cup. It's not going to happen. So if there's any additions to be made or plays to be made before the season or during the season, I certainly think it's up front. And then that leads me to, think about guys like Nyes. Are you going to step up Matthew Nyes and take another big step? I think he's done nothing but take great steps forward since coming into the pro ranks, and he's done very well. Can you do that again? Can you become that power forward who can play up and down the lineup? Easton Cowan, is he going to make the team? Is he old enough and mature enough to do it? If you look at his birth certificate, you go, holy smokes, we would be crazy to put any stock into this kid and expect anything from him. But from his maturity level that you can try to grasp when he's doing his interviews and talking about the game, and then what he's done in his career so far in the leagues that he's played in has been nothing short of excellent. So you wouldn't want to put it on a kid like that, but you could say maybe this guy's going to come in and make a really nice depth piece that's constantly getting better in the bottom six, perhaps. So you never know what's going to happen, but I do worry about them being a little bit lean up front.
Aside from the holes that we are obvious when it comes to the depth up front, how are you feeling about going into the season with Anthony Stolarz and Joseph Woll as the tandem in net?
I mean, I don't have qualms with it. Are they, is it the setup that Boston had last year? No, it's not. You don't have a Vezina winner backed up by a potential Vezina winner and, flip-flop. Your biggest problem is not, well, our two goalies are some of the greatest in the world. Which one are we going to play and whose feelings are we going to hurt? It's two guys that are capable, absolutely. And, I lead with Joseph Woll. I look at him as the starter, and I think that, he hasn't, had a chance to really show what he could be. So it's a big year for him to say, plant his stake and say, this is who I am. This is what I'm capable of. And mentally, I think he's got it all in spades. Physically, I think he's extremely capable. And when you watch him play, he's just got this calmness and this presence and confidence about him that I think every goaltender looks for. So the sky is the limit for Joseph Woll. What's going to happen is, nobody knows. That's why we play. That's why there's a season, is to see what happens. I certainly think there's potential there. And, goaltenders this day and age don't play 75 games. You're going to have a capable backup. And I think that Anthony Stolarz can certainly be that. Again, I think he's going to look to plant his stake and say, this is my potential. This is what I'm capable of in this league. I think he could back up Woolsey very well. And he's a big body. I think he's got, the mindset that could handle the market very well and, let things, water off a duck's back, so to speak. So, I mean, the potential is absolutely there. Is everyone jumping for joy saying, we've got the answer in net, Lord, hallelujah? It's not that, but the potential is certainly there. And I'm not, I'm not worried about it. It's not my number one concern. I think that the potential is absolutely there for them to take the reins and show who they are. And they're both very capable. And like I keep saying, potential. It's up to them now to fulfill that potential.
Do you see a situation where it's like a balance between the two, where you don't want to put so much wear and tear on Woll because of his injury history, where maybe he plays 41 games, maybe just a little bit more north of just around 50. Stolarz plays around 30, 40, because you look at his line of work too, albeit a small sample in 4 seasons, but a 288 goals against average, 913 save percentage. Best numbers came the last season with the Florida Panthers, and even then with the Anaheim Ducks, considering how bad they were, he looked pretty solid. If there's a situation where Stolarz has to become the number one starter, is it going to work out in the sense that, are you betting on that small sample, or is everything going to catch up to him because of a small body of work?
Yet to be seen. I think he's capable of doing it, and yeah, he's going to take more of the workload than a traditional backup might have. I see them being those two players. I could see them, being joined at the hip, constantly chatting, constantly mixing it up in practice, going over things together, going out early and working on the same type of thing. They seem to be cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways on how they approach the game and their mindset. So I'm hoping, and my fingers are crossed, that they gel together and support each other. And it's not just like, oh, here's Woll and here's Stolarz. It's like, here's our goalies, and they don't really care, what day they're playing, what their opponent is. They're just, working on becoming the best goalie tandem in the league and switch hitting it. And if some guy gets hurt, that's fine. Let's let him get recovered, and I'll take the load from here on out until you're back, and just switch hitting it with that mentality, kind of having a yin and yang where they can complement each other, fill in for each other, and support each other. I think that would be that would serve them pretty well, because talking to them, I know Stoli, I played with him. I feel like they approach the game mentally in the same way, and I think that's huge being a goaltender in that market of Toronto.
Brad Treliving spoke very highly of Chris Tanev when they acquired him, and we've seen Morgan Riley over his tenure with the Leafs kind of roll through partners, trying to figure out who's the best partner for the type of game that Morgan Riley plays. Is Chris Tanev maybe the perfect partner, just the way that he plays the game, the way that he sees the game, to give Morgan Riley that opportunity to be that kind of puck-moving rush defenseman that he's been looking for his entire career, basically?
Yeah, I think on paper it makes sense to put them together, right? You got, Tanev, a right-hander, physical, fearless, more stay-at-home, more defensive-minded, and that could complement to Morgan Riley, right? But, whether they gel together and have that chemistry or not, kind of irrelevant to me. You hope that they do, obviously, if you're a fan of the Maple Leafs, but to me, it's just that pressure and workload on Morgan Riley. He's been expected to be the man. He's expected to do everything. He's expected to be offensively, bountiful. He's expected to be defensively sound, and he's just the man. And he's kind of sitting alone on an island there, expected to do everything. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think that's, who he's supposed to be. And I'm kind of excited for Morgan Riley this year, whether he's a partner with Tanev or not, or it works out or whatever. They mix people up and play with different, pairings. Berube is going to figure out what works best, and they're going to try some different things, I'm sure. But to me, it's just the fact that he has the pressure off and he's able to sink into a role that he's better suited for at this point of his career. I think that just that alone could give him, the springboard to have one of his best seasons.
And even when you look back to his time in Calgary too, where he was playing with still some top 4 puck moving defenders, most notably Noah Hanifin was probably one of those guys where, yeah, he's got a little bit more of that offensive game, but he provides that complementary balance to Riley's game. And obviously, Treliving did speak highly of Tanev, but the other one I'm really not concerned, but I'm really interested to see is how Ekman-Larsson comes into the factor. And we talked about how in the past, how Morgan Riley's been bumped off power play number 1. Oliver Ekman-Larsson could possibly overtake that spot from Riley again, because Now, it's supposed to be Klingberg's last year, but he got injured, and the Maple Leafs were kind of in that shuffle to try and find another shooter from the back end, and Ekman-Larsson can do that. If Morgan Rielly was able to get better quality chances from the point and a little bit more power, would that be his over Ekman-Larsson's?
I think time will tell. I think it's kind of, he's certainly going to get his looks, and I don't think anybody on that power play has any room to complain or say, I don't deserve this. I mean, what they put up in the playoffs was nothing short of bloody embarrassing. It was absolutely embarrassing, their power play, with that amount of, quote unquote firepower. To come up with that production in the playoffs was literally embarrassing. So if any changes are made, if anyone's put in any place, first thing I would think is there better not be any bitching or complaining about it, because you guys have put yourself in the position that you are. You put out the product that you did in the playoffs. Now everything is up for grabs. So Morgan Rielly is going to get his looks on the power play. There's no doubt about it. But if OEL comes in and he's a different look and he's a different presence up top and quarterbacking it and moving it around, then so be it. Morgan can move to the second unit and see what they can do with the time they're given. But right now, to me, it's a blank slate. Your guys' numbers were embarrassing in the playoffs, and they're going to try to change that. They've got new power play coaches coming in, new coaches in general. You got some new personnel. They're going to try to figure it out, but by no means should anyone on that roster be like, hey, you can't mess this thing up, or hey, I can't move off of this situation. You had your chance and it was pathetic. And now the power play is probably going to look different. Hopefully, Morgan Rielly finds his stride and everyone figures it out and everything goes well. And we don't even talk about it. All we do is watch and goo and ga about how good the power play is. But until that happens, the changes that are going to be made, the guys are going to have to roll with the punches.
Yeah, just going off of that too, Jay. I mean, this is something I've talked about many times on this podcast, and I don't know if you see the same thing from the outside looking in, but one of the, and this is nothing against Morgan Rielly. I think he's a phenomenal defenseman, but one of the things that kind of hits my strings is that one of the things he struggles with the most is getting the puck through the opposing players that are coming at him. And I think that, to me, kind of pushes me towards Oliver Ekman-Larsson in that sense, in that, he's proven that he's been able to consistently get the puck through, and maybe that's something that Morgan Rielly struggles with from time to time.
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not going to act like I am, a savant on the intricacies of NHL power plays, but I was a defenseman at points in time, and I do know that, if you're looking for that big highlight roll, top titty from the point every time, this day and age, more often than not, that's going to get blocked and there's going to be someone in its way. And, if you got a guy that's just, realizes he has a half a second less than he's used to and just puts that quick little snapper low just outside the guy's shin pads and just finds a way to get to the net, that the players in front there and the personnel that are in that position are gonna take that and do what they can with it, and you're gonna have more success just getting something through than trying to make the big play that looks good from the point. Morgan Rielly's a smart player, smarter than I ever could hope to be, and I'm sure he'll figure that out. But the problems that they have had in the past, I just think with the new personnel, as far as players and coaching staff, they're going to shake things up. It's going to be a different look, and I'm sure Morgan Rielly will be just fine up there.
Sorry, Peter, just to follow up on that. I recently came out with a piece looking at three predictions for the upcoming season. One being Austin Matthews wins the Rocket Richard again. Two being Nick Robertson tucks 20 for the Leafs. But my third one, and this kind of leads into our next question in terms of defensemen, is that Timothy Liljegren has a breakout year. And obviously the Yanni Hakanpää situation, like, who the hell knows what's going on with Yanni Hakanpää at this point? I think it's the biggest mystery in the NHL offseason. But does that give opportunity to a guy like Timothy Liljegren now, who signed a new contract, to come out and maybe have a breakout year?
Well, I hope so. I mean, he's kind of one of the question marks of, is he going to be playing with Oliver Ekman-Larsson? Is that the second pairing or third pairing? And whatever it ends up being is fine. But if he's the one question mark, kind of back there, I mean, I really like McCabe and Benoit together. I don't think anyone's expecting them to be world beaters. Just do your thing, do more of the same, be solid, eat your minutes that you do, get the puck into the forwards' hands. I think they can be just fine. I'm not worried about them. But if Liljegren takes a step forward this year, finds more confidence, is happy with his contract, realize that he's going to be there and kind of takes the pressure off and he can just relax and play solid. If he does that, I think their decor is really in a good place. Again, he's kind of one of the one question marks. He can be inconsistent. If he finds consistency, takes another step forward, I think that would just speak volumes for how solid that back end could be.
Just to previously go back to the power play before, because we have also seen Timothy Liljegren there. Maybe he gets that second power play option as a result of getting those more minutes. So maybe you can rotate or maybe have two defenders on the second power play unit where you have Ekman-Larsson and Liljegren, fellow countrymen trying to work something out where, I don't know how the plays are going to shake out, but someone who possibly does know how it's going to play out is probably Mark Savard, because he's one of the assistant coaches and is going to run the power play for the Maple Leafs. And obviously there was already, going back to Berube, some familiarity there. In both regards to Riley, Liljegren, Ekman-Larsson, or even like both forward units for the power play, how important is this to try and get back on track with someone who's had success in both NHL and OHL level and trying to solve teams' problems? Because the one thing that stood out for me was players have got to be creative and not have set plays, is what Savard said in an interview, I believe, at the start of last season. So I just wanted to get your take on that and how robotic the Maple Leafs power play has been, considering all the set plays that we've seen.
Yeah, I think, the one great thing about it is that it can't get any worse than it was in the playoffs. Every number I see that comes out as far as, how many power plays the Oilers could have had at a certain point in time and not done anything with before their percentages as low as the Maple Leafs was like this astronomical number, just head shaking numbers for that group. So there's only one way to go, and that's up. But I think with players that are cut from a power play type of cloth, offensively minded players, to have a coach say, we need to get less robotic and more creative, I think that's music to people's ears that are in that position. They're obviously going to work and create an identity and have their little spots that they like to hit. But if you have players and personnel, Auston Matthews has got his spots that he likes to be in, and Nylander is going to be in certain spots they like to be, and you're going to have guys in net front where they like to be. And if you can just give yourself a bunch of different options, today's day and age, NHL, they go through so much video. They break down different teams' tendencies. If you have a couple of set things that you're going to look for every time, they'll shut that down so fast, and you'll be sitting there with absolutely nothing in your hands, and you'll have zero success, which is what they've had. So to open it up and invite creativity and get a new look and a new, plan that allows them to be creative, allows them to roll with the punches and look at what they're given and adapt to that on the fly. I think offensively minded players really like that. And if you get enough pieces and enough looks where we have three different options, no matter what they throw at us, if you can find one of those, it's going to be very hard to defend. But again, they've had an abysmal showing recently, and the only way to go is up. So I'm sure that they'll be looking to get on the right foot early and often and see if they can find some chemistry and leave everything from last year behind as far as the power play is concerned.
If you had one or two players this season, and we've talked about a bunch of them here already, but one or two players this season that should be X factors for this Leafs season in terms of their success, who would it be for you?
Well, I mean, obviously you're going to look at the Matthewses and the Nylanders and those type of players, and they got to be what they are. And to me, in the playoffs, if we're talking playoff time, it's those big boys. It's hey, you are a superstar, time to be a superstar, right? The regular season trophies and accolades and numbers, they're all great, but the more of those you get, the more you're expected to do it in the playoffs. So I'm looking for the big boys to be the big boys in the playoffs, but also, guys like Matthew Knies. I'm so high on Matthew Knies since I first met him and we interviewed him a couple of times. I love the way he thinks of the game and his attitude towards it. I think his role can only get better. And for a guy with skill that can play with those high-end players who can also be a power forward and be very difficult to take off the puck and forecheck and create that ozone time down low, I think that the sky's the limit for him. And if he keeps getting better, I think he's going to be forced to be reckoned with on this roster.
It's funny you brought up Knies because I actually have him as one candidate that can break out this season if he gets those top 6 minutes. I mean, he was 7th in rookie scoring. There's no doubt in my mind that he probably reached the 50-point mark plateau, given with the talent that he's going to play with. Really interesting to see how that's going to play out for him because he does have top 6 potential labeled all over him. From Matthew Nyes to Austin Matthews and throughout the whole entire roster, and also the improvements that they made this season. Obviously, they're still, a month away until training camp starts. There's probably going to be some holes that need to be filled, some moves that Treliving's probably going to make. Given where the team was last season, and not necessarily trying to predict the future, but is this team capable of improving on what they accomplished last season?
I think they're capable of it. Yes. Will they do it or not? Yet to be seen. That this team has a history of being Jekyll and Hyde. They can be extremely good, and then sometimes they can just be abysmally bad. And no one can predict the future. No one has a crystal ball. But I think they made, first of all, the change behind the bench. I nothing against Sheldon Keefe, but a message gets stagnant after an amount of years, especially when it's not successful. So I'm most excited to see Craig Berube, getting his claws into this team and seeing how they respond. And if everyone gets on board and kind of understands the assignment, I think that the talent is there to go further than they have in the past. And I absolutely hope that happens. But again, it's up to those players to adopt the mindset of making some changes and being a different team, especially in the playoffs.
And this actually goes into my next point. And one of my final questions here is, you mentioned Berube. Obviously, we talked about him off the top of the show and how he could get the most out of his players. Obviously, the one main thing is basically Mitch Marner at this point. All the controversy surrounding him, his level of play in the postseason, tailing off and not being as consistent as he is in the regular season. There was that coffee meet, picture that became viral on there. Not important at this point. But my main question to you, Jay, is, given how Berube has those players that have that work ethic and that mindset and that mentality, is he the kind of coach that can try and get through to Marner and be that kind of player where he doesn't shy away from the physical plays and he's always involved? Because I know in the first 3 seasons when he was in the playoffs, he was laying it out all on the line, blocking shots, getting in front of, David Pastrnak slappers, Zdeno Chara's, everything. And then all of a sudden, that's kind of tailed off. I just wanted to get your take if this is possibly the right move for both Berube and Marner to try and get the best out of each other.
Well, you hope so. And I mean, it's what you would do if you wanted to make that change, right? Get a high quality, successful coach who's been there before, who has a certain expectation of how a team needs to be playing, and get him at the helm and try to get a Mitch Marner to adjust accordingly. I think Mitch Marner is going to have a good season. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. I think he's going to get tons of points, and that's all fine and dandy. I don't think that's what the Leafs Nation is looking for right now. I think that wears off pretty quickly when you get those regular season accolades and fill your pants in the playoffs. Everyone's tired. Like, they're not going to be impressed by that. So I'm fully expecting him to have a great regular season. But to me, it's are you willing just to, like, not that Mitch Marner is Darcy Tucker or whatever, try to be Darcy Tucker, but to have that level of intensity in your eyes and that laser focus of, I do not care who, what, or when, I am going to get that puck first. I am going to be a dog on a bone, and that is mine, and I will not stop until that series is won. Then I'll adjust and start another one and just keep going like a dog. I don't think Mitch Marner has played like that in the past. I think he's been more kind of hopeful and kind of hanging on the outside and hoping, hey, my skill will get me there. And I've been critical of Mitch Marner because watching him play in the playoffs, I just don't think is in any recent history is a formula to win in the playoffs. So I hope that he does make the adjustments, as much as I'm sure he's pissed off at the heat he's taken and the criticism he's taken, as much as he wants to shut out the media and all that stuff is all fine and dandy. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder and have a great regular season. To me, I really hope that him and Craig Berube can kind of gel together and Mitch can realize that I am a really good player. I am an all-star. I am a superstar, and I'm going to show it in this playoffs. And I hope he adopts that mentality.
Jay, I'm going to throw you on the spot a little bit here. So I made my 3 predictions, not so bold, let's say, but if you had one bolder prediction for the Leafs upcoming season, what would it be?
I think that the goaltending is going to be a hell of a lot better than anyone else believes it is. I think people are writing this team off just because they don't have a Vezina winner in between the pipes. I firmly believe those two guys can get the job done. And I also think that as much as they are lacking depth, the depth pieces that they do have with Max Domi and Matthew Nyes and those types of players, I think they're really going to stand out. And if this team is going to have success, especially in the playoffs, I think it's going to look a lot more like a team mentality with an identity, like the Florida Panthers, just moving forward wave after wave, more so than it is, oh, I hope that Nylander and Matthews can win us a bunch of series. I think that those depth pieces are going to be able to step up, find the chemistry, really love playing for Craig Berube and finding more success than I think people give him credit for right now.
I will add too that every time that Max Domi has signed a contract outside of the one he signed with Columbus, he's gone on to have one hell of an offensive season. So let's hope that signing that 4-year deal comes through. But we've taken up enough of your time, Jay. We appreciate you coming on, and I said it at the beginning of the show. You're a charismatic voice in Leafs Nation right now. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the near future.
Hey, I love doing it, guys, and appreciate you having me on. Good luck with everything, and keep doing what you're doing.
Have a good one, buddy.
Absolutely. Have a good one, Jay.
You too.
Well, buddy, that as always, like I said, great voice in Leafs Nation, Jay Rosehill.
Couldn't agree more.
It was a pleasure having him on, and a lot of good insight as to what's to come for Leafs Nation. Before we close it out here, just a quick word from our sponsors over at DraftKings as well. Know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only 2 days out of the whole year without a game. 2. With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't get any easier, any simpler. Right now, you can take the Leafs at, I believe it was plus 1,300 to win the Stanley Cup. That's an interesting futures to take, especially with what we just heard. And if you are new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Deposit and eligibility restrictions apply. See terms and responsible gaming resources at dkng.co/base. Well, Peter, you saw her face 2 times this week, guys. So glad you joined us for this episode with Jay Rosehill. It was a special episode. Mm-hmm. We were able to get Jay on to kind of give us a little bit of insight. Obviously, he talks about it on a consistent basis with Nick Alberga over at the Leafs Nation as well. So if you haven't checked out the Leafs Nation for that, make sure you check out the Leafs Morning Take. They have some great guests on there. They just had Corey Cross, former Leaf, on there as well to talk about Jake McCabe and him as a defenseman.
Brian McCabe, I think.
Was it Brian McCabe? They were talking about Jake McCabe.
Oh, were they talking? Were they? Yeah. Okay, my mistake. Sorry.
You know what? That's all right. That's why I watched it, because I thought it was Brian McCabe too.
I'm out of it right now. So yeah, I totally botched that.
Who, let's note, Brian McCabe, former Leaf, now has his name on the Stanley Cup as a member of the Florida Panthers. But that's besides the point. Anyways, Peter, before we close it out for this special episode, anything you had that you wanted to let our listeners know about?
Just working on some, a few days ago, my 3 players in danger of losing their roster spot came out, so go check out that. But I'm also going to be working on some Hlinka Gretzky stuff, some standouts from that tournament as it's ongoing right now, but also some prospects to keep an eye on that are underrated in the system for the season. Awesome.
Good to hear. And guys, before we go, check out our giveaway, please. It's with Dauber Hockey. If you're a fantasy hockey player or fantasy hockey GM, armchair GM, whatever the hell you want to call it, you want to get in on this giveaway. It's a free copy of their 2024-25 fantasy hockey guide. We have 10 to give away. We have one entry right now. One entry. If you enter right now, you're guaranteeing yourself a copy of the 2024-25 NHL Fantasy Hockey Guide by Dauber Hockey. All you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, show us proof of subscription, and we'll enter your name in the draw. 10 to give away. If only 10 enter, everyone gets one. We guarantee you a copy if only 10 people enter.
Everyone's a winner.
It's easy, man.
Yeah.
It's easy shit right now. You got to get in there. Anyways, until next week, Peter, it's been a good episode. We're going to hit episode 170 next week. For all those who tuned in today to listen to Jay and what he had to say about the Toronto Maple Leafs, be sure to tune in next week. Peter and I always have some good shit to say. So until next time, go Leafs go. Enjoy your week.